Hey, welcome to our first painting video for WWG. We're just going to start off with something simple today, one of our dungeon bases. I'll show you how to dry brush this up start to finish, and then we'll have a bit of fun at the end and add some blood onto it. Okay, I'm going to start off with sort of a medium-sized dry brush here, and we're going to use a nice flat mid-brown. So the paint I'm using is a bit thick and old, so I'm going to have to put a couple of coats on. So I'm not wiping off quite as much as I would normally. I'm just picking up more of the tone of that paint. And there you go, that's your first stage. Just to mention, so I've mounted this on top of a pot, just so that I don't have to hold the piece while I'm painting it. That way I'm not rubbing off any paint. I can rest my hands on the pot while I'm painting it. It's just a lot easier to paint with. And an old paint pot is ideal for mounting things on top of, with a bit of blue tack, so you can take them off without damaging them. Right then, we're going to start with our first coat of grey. So I'm going to go for a bit of a mid-grey and dark grey mix. Don't want to go too dark and cover up all of that brown. And we started the base off with a black spray paint. Nothing too heavy. Don't want to obscure the detail with loads and loads of spray. If you don't spray it black first of all, then the paint won't adhere to it, especially when you're dry brushing. And with resin, it's also a good idea to give it a wash first of all, before you spray it. This will wash off any of the mould release which they use to get the resin pieces out of the moulds. And it actually stops the paint sticking to it. So you may need to clean your pieces before you start spraying them. It's mixing in slightly and looking a bit more natural, but on the later stages I'm going to make sure it's dry. And the quickest way to do that, if you don't want to hang around, is to have a hairdryer next to you and give it a good blast with the hairdryer in between your stages. So that's sort of your base colour now, is that dingy, muddy grey colour. Make sure that's thoroughly dry, and then we'll go for a mid-grey. So all you're doing here is building up different layers of texture and depth. And with each dry brush, you can use progressively less. I'd say the more you fuss with it, the less good the result's going to be. And when it comes to dry brushing, it's a good idea to have a different selection of brushes. So I've got a few different sizes and different stiffnesses. You can see this is quite a stiff bristle brush, and this one's quite soft. And depending on what you're dry brushing, if you're dry brushing something flat, this sort of soft large brush is going to do a better job. If you're dry brushing something like a rock, you're going to want a smaller, stiffer bristle brush. And the technique of dry brushing is basically where you use something like some blue towel or a piece of cardboard even. I often use a piece of cardboard, and you get your paint. This time I'm going for a lighter grey. You load your brush up, not too much, and then wipe off any excess until what you're left with are effectively almost dry pits of pigment on the brush. And you can play around, you can get different effects depending on how much paint you leave on the brush. So I'm going to use one more shade of grey, So this is a really light blue-grey now. I'm going to concentrate more around the edges where the light would hit the base. And then in the centre where your figure is, it would be slightly darker and more in shadow. You can see I'm just trying to drag the brush in from the outside this time. And that's your dry brushing stage complete. What we're left with now is quite a uniform finish on that base. So to make it look a bit more natural, we're just going to add some washes and glazes. I'm just going to use some greens and browns to create a sort of dirty mossy effect where people have been walking over it through the years. Way too much brown coming out of that. And you can thin that down with either water or a thinning medium. We'll just apply this to the edge of some of the rocks. Some sort of brushing and dabbing that on, so in some places we've got thin glazes a bit, and in others you end up with slightly thicker pools, so it looks quite natural. And this will also get rid of that sort of dry effect that you get from dry brushing, which sometimes is the effect you want, but it's also a bit of a side effect that you can get rid of by adding glazes. And there's that greeny brown moss. So we're going to wait for that to dry, and then we'll come back, we'll have some fun and add some blood and gore.